This podcast is solely for educational purposes and isn't intended as a substitute for the advice of a qualified professional. Hi, and welcome to the NPDCAST, where I, a narcissist, talk about the ins and outs of NPD, also known as narcissistic personality disorder. Throughout this series, I will discuss the reality of NPD, as well as the recovery process, the ups and downs, and the complexities. You can call me Nin. I highly suggest you check out my first episode, or at the very least, the beginning, to hear my disclaimers. I'm not here to tell you what to think or believe, only to keep an open mind and heart as I discuss my experience and what's worked for me. Today's topic is work and education. I want to first say that I don't think it's a wise or safe decision to open up about your NPD in a school setting or place of work. As much as I'd like to encourage you to be confident and unapologetic for your mental health, we simply aren't at a place in society where people are accepting and understanding of something as complex as NPD. It could get you fired, harassed, or discriminated against. That being said, there are ways to look out for and after yourself and your NPD without it being made public. Let's start with what you should consider when getting a job or going into education with NPD. To avoid allowing your mental health to control you, there needs to be boundaries set. I'm not talking bedtimes, although I'm sure those would help, but rather your own expectations, limitations, and realistic goals. It's easy with NPD to overestimate, idealize, and set unrealistic standards. This might lead to you coming home feeling deflated, degraded, and low. What you want is the right balance. So how do we do that? It's more of a personal preference, really. If you like making lists, do. If you prefer to do things in your head, there's nothing wrong with that. But realistically, it'll be more beneficial to have a journal dedicated solely to education or work. In this journal, you can monitor your expectations and goals in a safe and private way that you can revisit, adapt, and alter as needed. If you have a therapist, maybe you can let them in on your journal and ask for their advice on whether what you have in there is achievable. If not, you can rework it together. The question you need to be asking yourself is, realistically, can I do this? Are these achievable for the average person? Because as much as I dislike to admit it, we're not superheroes, or in the case of some, supervillains. As much as we lean towards perfection, we have to accept that it's better to be the best version of ourselves that we can be, and that rather than trying to impress others, we need to be aiming towards impressing ourselves. I can't tell you specifically what jobs to get into, but it's worth considering what your skill set is. Things you might feel are negative, such as perfectionism or being highly strung, could in fact go really well with certain kinds of jobs. So let's say you get into a job or form of education and you feel overwhelmed. The teacher is being too critical, you're disappointed with your efforts. Take control. Speak to your teacher and let them know you benefit from a different style of feedback. If they take issue with it, take issue with them and speak to someone higher up. It's your education after all, and outside of general respect and manners, you're in control. As long as you're respectful when asking, what could go wrong? As for your boss, the same applies. Let them know you work especially well when your boss is communicative in a healthy and straightforward manner. Not blunt criticism, but helpful feedback. At least that way, if you're falling behind, there's honesty and support behind it. You could develop a really good dynamic with your teacher or boss through this, and I only wish I'd known this myself in the past because it could have helped clear up a lot of confusion. Unfortunately, some jobs just aren't meant to be. I worked a receptionist job for almost 2 months and was treated very poorly. Between my co-workers engaging in a toxic work environment and the entire building rarely acknowledging me, such as saying hello or goodbye, I grew severely depressed even in that short period of time. You can try and improve it by addressing it with HR or speaking to your manager and informing them that it's impacting your work life, but for me it was temporary and wasn't worth the hassle. And sometimes, even if it's not temporary, it's not worth the hassle. Sometimes it's easier to find a new job and start afresh. I think above all else, for people with NPD, what's integral to a successful work or education lifestyle is communication, a good ratio of positive and constructive feedback, healthy dynamics where you respect one another's personal space and lives, and a supportive team that makes you feel important and needed. And I think it's even healthier for people with NPD to set those as their goals so that they don't seek to overachieve or feel disappointed when high standards aren't met. It's important to remember your fellow school or workmates are people too and have things going on in their lives just as you do. Sometimes people don't meet your expectations, and that's okay. That's why communication exists, to let them know you need more or less in order to do a successful job. But whilst being mindful of what's realistic, equally be mindful of what you deserve, and if time and time again a job or form of education is letting you down or treating you poorly, it might be time to move on. Today's question is, what occupations or professional hobbies would a person with NPD excel at more than a neurotypical because of their personality disorder? I personally don't think I can name specific occupations, as everyone is so different. NPD varies in so many ways, and some have ADHD or autism alongside the diagnosis, meaning something might fit ideally for one person but not for another. I think the ultimate answer to this question would be to find what works for you. Figure out your skill set, maybe tailor it to something that you're interested in, match it to a job, and set realistic expectations. I think the idea that being antisocial or narcissistic makes you good at, say, being a CEO is unrealistic. Sure, we possess traits that might enable us to excel at such a job, but to imply every narcissist or antisocial individual could only ever be a CEO is setting an unrealistic expectation. You don't have to be a CEO to get by. You don't have to be rich or own companies to fit your diagnosis. There are plenty of people with NPD who work in care, fulfilling compassionate roles, or management, overseeing important events. There's always hope for finding a job, just don't lose sight of what's important to you. As usual, if you have any questions you'd like to be answered during the next or most relevant episode, feel free to leave them in the comments. Next time I will be diving into the topic of control. Thanks so much for tuning in to the NPDcast today, and hopefully you learned something valuable about yourself or someone in your life through listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it, please consider leaving a comment or a star. It really helps me see what direction I'm heading in. I hope you all have a wonderful and safe new year. Thanks so much for the support so far. Until next time, I've been Nin. Bye!